Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Jay Privman, the national correspondent with Daily Racing Form. I've been doing the Derby Watch ever since I started at the Form. The first one was in the spring of 1999, but this year I'll have a new partner, and that's going to be Marty McGee, who I've known for longer than I've even worked at the Racing Form. Honored to have him joining me on the Derby Watch trail, and we're going to be giving you sort of a sneak peek of Derby Watch, which doesn't officially start for a couple of weeks because this week we've got 3 prep races on the road to the Kentucky Derby, and Daily Racing Form thought it would be smart for the two of us to go through these races and give you some insight on who we like in them and maybe a little bit forward-looking view as well as to who we think might improve on the road to the Derby. And so without further ado, I think I want to bring in Marty at this time. Marty, how are you?
Hey, pal, how are you? Thanks for that introduction.
Well, I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to these races this week, and obviously looking forward to Derby Watch starting. I think it's one of the more popular things in Daily Racing Form as we get closer and closer to the Kentucky Derby. This year's Derby will be on May the 2nd, so it's the first Saturday in February. This week will give us pretty much a little more than 3 months now out from the Derby itself. Marty, just a little bit of background on you. Even before you worked for the Racing Form, I know you were, having been a Louisville native, you were an attendee of the Derby. So how many Derbies have you been to now?
Well, my first one was when I was a freshman in high school, and without giving away our ages, Jay, since we're both the class of beep, I have been to every Derby since Secretariat ran without me, but none of the winners have run without me since. So my first one was in 1974, and I attended the University of Kentucky with the intent of being a sports writer, and that kind of evolved into being a horse racing writer. And I still have vivid recollections of Joe Hirsch back in one of those rooms at Keeneland, pounding away on the keyboard and putting the poor teletype guy to work. The guy never got to eat or go to the bathroom. That's how much copy Joe pounded out back in those days. So it's really an honor for myself to join you in doing what you picked up where Joe left off back in the late 90s. So yeah, I think I've got enough foundation to go ahead and give this a shot.
Yeah, I would say so. So Marty's in South Florida. Well, he'll be on hand to cover the Holy Bull on Saturday. I'll be at Santa Anita for the Robert Lewis Stakes. But the race that we're going to start with on this 3-pack of Derby preps is at Aqueduct on Saturday, and that's the Withers. All of these races are Grade 3 races. All of them are worth 17 points overall on the road to the Kentucky Derby, with 10 points for first, 4 for second, 2 for third, and 1 for fourth. So, Marty, let's take a look overall at the Withers Stakes. The horse, I guess, who would be the marquee name in here is the horse who won the Remsen Stakes in his most recent start, and that's Shotsky. That race all at 1 1/8, as is the Withers. So we know he can handle 1 1/8 at Aqueduct. But in looking at this race, just give me your overview of him specifically and the race itself.
Well, I thought he was able to kind of walk the dog in the Remsen, Jay, and I think he's quite beatable in here, given that there's other speed in here, namely Monday Morning QB, who starts from the 2-hole. I would be fading this horse Monday Morning QB. He's 4-1 on the line, but he's never gone this distance. And having gone back and watched his replay today in winning the Arnold Heft at Laurel Park, I thought there were a couple things that make him very beatable too in here, aside from the fact that he's going to be entertaining Shotsky, you would think. And that is Monday Morning Quarterback had the open air outside box, a perfect, literally a perfect trip from the 7-hole in a 1-turn race in a field of 7. And then he didn't switch leads the whole way down the stretch. And that's a big no-no for me. So having scanned all these horses in here, Jay, I really thought that Portos had the most upside, not only in this race, but in terms of an overall Derby candidate. He's a Tappet who remarkably has run all 4 of his races around 2 turns. And as we all know, that ends up being a pretty good indicator as to who can get the Derby distance or not. And I think Portos will be one of the favorites, if not the favorite, with Shotsky for a guy named Todd Pletcher. And I think he's going to be the horse to beat. If not tomorrow, then certainly if he runs creditably, then I think he's a horse to watch along the Derby Trail.
So for those of you, obviously, who are following along on the webinar here, you're seeing some of the things that you can do with Daily Racing Form's proprietary formulator software. Right now, for instance, taking a look at Todd Pletcher and a deep dive that you can do on the statistics for him, on his runners, how many days off he's had for those horses, and how they've done. You can, as you can see here, look at his 3-year-olds only, for instance, and how they've done. There's just so many ways to use the software here. And when we were looking at Monday Morning QB moments ago, you could see that you could click all the way through there and watch tape of that race that Marty was referring to. So there's just so many different ways that you can do deep dives on the horses, the trainers, and obviously the jockeys as well when you're using this formulator product. Portos, as Marty mentioned, on the outside. The concern I have with this horse, Marty, is that his one and only big race was on a sloppy sealed track. And I just don't know if that kind of flattered him. It must not have been a very strong field because there were only 5 horses in the race, and he was less than 2 to 5 in the race. So I'm just not sure how strong the competition was that he beat. It's a race that I really have a lot of trouble having a strong opinion on. Going back to Shotsky, I do an analysis of all these races at our Road to the Kentucky Derby page. And after Shotsky won the Remsen last time, I wrote that I thought he prevailed on a deep, tiring surface, but I thought that the pace of the race was quite slow, and he was hanging on at the end to beat Ajaweed, but it just wasn't a visually impressive race. The Beyer speed figure wasn't anything of great consequence. It came back in 86 for the level. So he's a big lumbering type. I don't think the distance is going to bother him any, but I'm not sure how good he is because, as you, I think, correctly pointed out, the pace certainly helped him. He got to walk the dog that day and really never was challenged. Another horse in here is coming out of a previous point scoring race, so I just want to go to now as we go through this race, is Prince of Pharaohs, number 6, who exits the Jerome last time out. He finished in a dead heat for second behind the runaway winner in that race, Independence Hall. Now, in terms of Independence Hall, as you can see, he had run a big race in the Nashua, getting a 101, and then last time, as we take a look at his past performances, so you can see the horse that Prince of Pharaohs was second to last time. The Jerome came back with only an 83, and in looking at the running line of Prince of Pharaohs, you can see that he was a lot closer at the furlong pole than he was at the finish line. He was losing ground after making a pretty decent run to get up into second. And so, Marty, this race having come back fairly slow, and with this horse losing ground at the end going a mile, do you think he can improve off of that, or do you think that's what he is?
I do. I think the morning line, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jay, he's 12 to 1 on the line. And I pre-made my own line, having done it for years for the Baltimore Sun before I went to the Forum. And I enjoyed doing that. And I made Portos 5 to 2, and I made Prince of Pharaohs only 6 to 1, just because I thought that when you have a horse like Independence Hall show up in the past performances, fans tend to bet them a little more heavily than not. Plus, Linda Rice has really, as we all know, just more or less owned Aqueduct in recent years, does very, very well there. And again, I thought that Monday morning quarterback would be able to entertain Shotsky on the front end. Going back to Portos, I do agree that he did win a weak maiden race, and his Buyers before that were not very good. And the fact that Todd Pletcher has him in New York as opposed to his regular training base down here at the Palm Beach Downs in Delray, Florida, is kind of a negative. It's just a kind of a read between the lines thing that we like to do. But again, he's by Taffet, and those horses tend to fare better with experience and with distance. So I just think that this is a possible meltdown race, with Monday Morning Quarterback pressing the issue, and several other speed horses in here, including Vanzy and Shotsky. And so I just think that if the thing's set up the way that you hope, the way you draw them up on the blackboard, as they say, that Portos is going to have a chance to run on at the end.
So last thing, and you were talking about how you make your own line when it comes to betting, and you said you had made Prince of Pharaoh 6. He's actually 8 on the track line. Portos is 3 on the track line. What for you would be an acceptable price on Portos?
I made him 5-2 over Shotsky at 3-1. I also had Monday Morning Quarterback at 3-1. And I know that he's 4-1 on the track line, so that's about right. Again, I just think that if you horses that don't switch leads going short, I think that they're in trouble if they're going to try and bite off a mile and an eighth. So it's going to be interesting to see what Jose Vargas does in terms of trying to get Monday Morning Quarterback to rate, because it just seems like he was really going at it even down the backside in the Laurel race. So I think that the pace is going to be quite a bit swifter than what Shotsky got last time.
And you can certainly see with Monday Morning Quarterback, who we're taking a look at right now on the webinar, his previous races, all in sprints, on or near the lead in all of those races. So as Marty is pointing out, certainly the expectation that with the sprint speed that he has, you would expect him to be in front as he now tries to go pretty much a quarter mile farther than he has in any of his previous starts, going 7/8 last time and now heading out to 1 1/8 miles on Saturday in the Withers at Aqueduct. Marty, that's about all I've got on this race. If you've got any other thoughts, let's hear them. Otherwise, I think it'll be time to just move on to the Holy Bull.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're going to do this with all 3 of these races, Jay, in that everybody's taking their shot right now. And as you look back when we get to the Triple Crown, you're going to say, oh, a horse, Monday Morning Quarterback. Remember him? Or Mr. Short and Simple. Remember him? And it's just, it's kind of a process of elimination. And once they've kind of shown they can't do it, they're kind of out of sight, out of mind.
So that's our little look there at the Withers. That'll be the first of the 3 point-scoring Derby preps that's going to be run on Saturday. The next one is the one that we've now put up on the screen for you. It's the Holy Bull at Gulfstream Park. This race at 1 1/16 miles, so slightly shorter than the Withers. And as you know, with the short run to the first turn at Gulfstream and the short finish line for the Holy Bull, it'll be an interesting race from that standpoint. But Marty, the field is small enough that posts shouldn't matter. You've been watching these horses up close over the last month now that you've been in South Florida. Give us an overview of a race in which obviously the headliner is going to be Tiz the Law.
Well, one thing, Jay, we were expecting a horse named Caracaro, who got a 92 buyer and winning a 1 mile maiden race here in December. We were expecting him to enter. Apparently there are some sales negotiations going on with him. You know, this is the time of year when if you have a good 3-year-old or a promising 3-year-old and you're not one of the big guys, i.e. Baffert, Asmussen, Chad Brown, Todd Fletcher et al., they come at you with their wallets. And apparently there's some kind of negotiation whereby Caracaro may or may not be sold. And we've been told that is the reason he was not entered in here, because perhaps there is a sale pending. It may or may not happen. But anyway, we were all kind of looking forward to him being a part of this field. As it is, we have a field of 7, and instead of Tiz the Law being 6-5 or so against Caracaro 2-1, now Tiz the Law is going to be 3-5 or so. I made a line for this. Jay Stone, who made the line, makes the line for Gulfstream, came in this morning, and I said, let's compare. I had Tiz the Law 3-5, so did he. I had Toledo 7-2, so did he. And then they all went up from there. But Tiz the Law, of course, was in the conversation big time prior to the Kentucky Jockey Club in terms of the Divisional Eclipse Awards. He blew that shot when he got beat at 1-2 or 3-5. 3-5, and he really didn't have much excuse in there, although he wasn't in the most comfortable position all the way around the two turns of that race. So I'm a big fan of Barkley Tagg, having worked in Maryland as long as I did, and having gotten to know him. And of course, he and Jack Knowlton made themselves famous by winning the 2003 Kentucky Derby with Funny-Side. He's back on the Derby trail. I'd like to see him continue. If he can't get past this, Jay, shame on him, because it sure looks like this Holy Bull could have come up tougher, and absolutely, Tiz the Law is the horse to beat.
So let's go back on the screen. We were just showing you some stuff with Tiz the Law, but I want to highlight it again. We clicked on the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes. It was the first time Tiz the Law had gone 2 turns. Obviously, it was at Churchill Downs, which is where the Derby's run, and it was on a sloppy sealed racetrack. As Marty was saying, I didn't think there was a whole lot of excuse for Tiz the Law in this race. He was in some traffic, but it was a good ground-saving spot. And I thought that once he had room to run, there really wasn't much there, and he should have done better. To me, what's notable now coming out of this race is how have these horses done in their next start? And I think that's where you can really do some homework here. We highlighted this a few moments ago, but I wanted to go back to this. As you can see, Silver Prospector, who won the Kentucky Jockey Club, came back in his next start and was a fairly well-beaten 4th in the Smarty Jones at Oaklawn Park just the other day. The second place finisher in the race, Finnick the Fierce, has also since come back to run. Well beaten in the Lecomte with a ground saving trip and just well beaten in that race. The horse who has done well coming out of this race was the original 4th place finisher, and that's Enforceable. And you can see that he won the Lecomte Stakes. He seems to be steadily improving, and perhaps with him, as you go through his past performances, maybe the sloppy sealed track at Churchill Downs didn't suit him. Maybe he's just getting better. Marty was talking a few moments ago about how well Tappets do with more racing. Well, here's a prime example of that. A horse who's had 7 starts so far, and in his most recent race, turned in a career top, winning the comp. But to me, Marty, the form coming out of the Kentucky Jockey Club is fairly muddled. Enforceable ran well, but the 2 who finished in front of Tiz the Law didn't exactly come back to distinguish themselves. And to me, the jury's still out on Tiz the Law. At a short price, I need to see him do better.
Well, you're right, but you could also say that for the whole thing. I mean, we could put the Breeders' Cup Junior the same way. So, and by the way, the horse South Bend, who was 6th, I believe, in there, he has entered. Apparently, Stan Huff and the Sagamore folks are giving up on dirt because they have him entered here Saturday in the Dania Beach, with the hope, I think, of rain coming, as they're predicting for both Friday and Saturday here in the South Florida area, and it going on to the main track. And that way, instead of him being 10-1 at his first start over the turf, he'd be like 2-1 with a bunch of scratches if it was on the main track. But anywho, yeah, it is. Jay, we've seen this many, many times where it's February and we have no clue who will be or should be the Kentucky Derby favorite, and that's why we're going to run through a dozen or 20 or whatever these preps coming down the road. And this is a pretty good test, I think you would agree, for Tiz the Law to go on and beat these horses, because if you can't beat these horses, you're going to have a lot of trouble in the next couple of preps on the way to Louisville.
So, Marty, let's talk about a couple of the others here who on paper look like they're going to give him the toughest run for the money. Beginning with number 4, Te Indien, who moved to the dirt after 2 grass races and won a 1-turn mile at Gulfstream, leading pretty much from start to finish in that race, beating Toledo, who is coming back in this race as well. Those 2 exiting the same race. It looks like a decent performance for the 2 of them on paper. Give me your thoughts on these 2 and their chances of beating Tiz the Law.
Yeah, I don't know if there was or was not a speed bias that day on December the 20th at Gulfstream, but a lot of times, Jay, you'll see horses here get on the front and never stop, and it's a fairly familiar phenomenon here at Gulfstream. Now, Going into that race, this is often a good gauge, I think, for handicappers, just in any type of situation. Toledo was 70 cents on the dollar, so he already had established form that made folks think he should get through that one other than. Whereas AT Indian was, he paid $30. So a lot of times you will see when horses get rematched like that, the horse who was by far favored over the other one will turn the tables and prove that race a fluke. I would think that given the other speed in here, given the way that AT Indian may have just been able to go on out by himself and lead that race, he's going to have company on the front end here. I would think in a head-to-head that Toledo would be deserving of being favored to beat AT Indian, and I would go that way. I think that Toledo, even though this is chalking out, I think that Toledo's definitely the most likely exacta ender behind the favorite here.
And he drew the rail, which going 2 turns, going a mile and a 16th at Gulfstream is certainly an advantage. Like we said, the fact that there's a small field in here, post shouldn't matter, but when you're going 2 turns at Gulfstream with that short run to the first turn, going a mile and a 16th or a mile and an eighth, I think that is certainly an advantageous spot to be. Let's just talk about a couple of the others in here, Marty. I wanted to get your thoughts on Uncork the Bottle, who is trained by Safi Joseph, who's having a terrific meet down there. This horse was claimed out of his debut off of Mike Maker and Ken Ramsey. They don't usually give horses away like that. And this horse obviously has run against vastly inferior company in his 2 subsequent starts. This is certainly the toughest race he'll have to date, but what kind of chance do you give him in here?
Well, I'm not going out on a limb here, Jay, by saying I don't think he's going to win. We did, as you might recall, we had a horse who ran for maiden 16 at Gulfstream, coming first in the Kentucky Derby last year. He wasn't the winner, but a horse named Gary West.
Maximum Security.
Maximum Security, yeah, that one. But Safi's had a breakthrough year. It's been about a year or so that he really started attracting some clients and everything. But the buyers say no in here. I don't really, in having listened to him talk about this horse, that he's really all that confident, or should he be? But they are, as we've mentioned a couple times already, they're giving him a chance to go on and show whether or not he can match up with this type of horses. I'm going to say no to him.
And also in terms of like just getting a chance, let's take a look at Clear Destination, who's a horse who's yet to run on dirt, 2 starts on synthetic, 4 on grass. And to me, one of the interesting things here, Marty, would be to maybe do a deep dive on the trainer, who Ashley Baranos, who I'm not that familiar with. And I think this is a case where for someone like me to be able to look up the statistics of her and to see what she does best in is extremely helpful, because she's not a familiar name, certainly on the Derby trail. And I think that this is really one of the things that you can really go to school on. For instance, looking here, we're highlighting how she does going from synthetic to dirt and seeing what her record is in that regard. And I think these are things that you can really take a look at. 38 horses that have made 43 starts, 8 for 43, but the ROI is an underperformer of $1.42. That's below average for certain.
Yeah, you also probably, this is just a guess, but I would think that her going from synthetic to dirt would be from Woodbine to Fort Erie, or Woodbine to Penn National, or something like that, Woodbine to Thistledown. So when you're talking about the strata we're talking about here, the tis the laws et al, Jay, I don't think that we're really going to be going in on a Clear Destination. Might be wrong, but I think the odds are such that he's probably going to have a tough time making this transition on Saturday.
So that's our look at the Holy Bull. Any other final thoughts on this race, Marty, or should we move on to the one that's out my way, the Robert Lewis?
No, I just Relentless Dancer. I think he's going to need one. He's been off for a while. Mike Maker was in between. There were several horses down here. Mike Maker was in between going in the Holy Bull or the Swale, which is being run 2 races before the Holy Bull. Got a couple of notables in there, Jay, in Untitled. The horse who got it 98 first time out for Ralph Nix was sold to Gary Barber. Now Mark Cassie has him. And also Green Light Go, the Champagne runner up behind Tis the Law. They're both running in the Swale. They'll be the 2 favorites in that 7 furlong race.
And that, again, that's earlier on the card at Gulfstream on Saturday. It's a 7-ace race. It is not a point-scoring race towards the Kentucky Derby, but it's certainly worth going to school on because you would expect the top performers in that race, if they have designs on the Kentucky Derby, to be coming back in something like the Fountain of Youth exactly 4 weeks later on February 29. So that's our look at the Holy Bull. We'll now turn our attention to the third and final point-scoring race on Saturday. And this is out in my backyard. It's the Robert Lewis Stakes at Santa Anita. Small field in here as well. The usual cast of characters showing up from a training standpoint, with Bob Baffert having 2 horses in here. They will be, at the least, 1,000 Words will be favored, and we'll see if High Velocity is the second choice in here. Marty, 1,000 Words, to this point in his career, he's done exactly the same thing that McKenzie did. Won a sprint at Santa Anita in late October in his debut, and then came back 6 weeks later, and in his second start went 2 turns in the Los Alamitos Futurity and won the race. Now, in the case of McKenzie, he got put up on a DQ of his stablemate Solomini, but it's obvious to me, Marty, that the way 1,000 Words has been campaigned, he's obviously a horse that has been held in very high regard from the time he was bought as a yearling for $1 million. He was favored first time out. And I thought his win last time was quite good, considering that he was giving away experience to Eno d'Or, who was coming off a second-place finish in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And if you watch the tape of this race, it looked to me like Eno d'Or was going to go by him. And I thought 1,000 Words just dug back in. You can see here's the tape. That's Eno d'Or coming up on the outside. 1,000 Words is between in the blue silks. And at mid-stretch, I don't think he's winning, but he fought back, holds the horse off, and I thought it was a terrific performance on his part.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10 when we watch races, you're seeing the horse in the pink silks go by the horse in the blue, 9 times out of 10. So I'm a big Eno d'Or fan, by the way. So the fact that 1,000 Words came back on him, I think, does make him 3-5 in here, Jay. It's just, I went back and watched this race pretty closely today. And even though there was no complications in terms of traffic because of the 4-horse field, I just think that was a key race, at least toward this. Now, how it ends up shaking out west, because Baffert not only has 1,000 Words and High Velocity, but as you well know, he has Nadal and he has Authentic and he has 8 Rings. So, as always, it will be interesting to see how Bob Baffert keeps these horses separate and trying to get 3 or 4 horses to be in the starting gate in the Kentucky Derby.
One of the things, again, it's not a great gambling race because, to me, 1,000 Words lays over this field. But the thing I liked about his last race, Marty, I like that he has tactical speed. I think it's an important thing throughout these preps. I think it's an important thing to have in the Kentucky Derby. And as you can see, his first race, he did not wear blinkers, and it's unusual to make a blinker change following a victory. But Baffert thought it was needed, and it certainly didn't hurt. That's for sure. He took a step forward on Figs, as we just saw from that video. He fought off Eno d'Or quite gamely, and he's going to be forwardly placed in this race as well. But let's go through and highlight a couple of the others in here. Let's start with his stablemate, High Velocity. He had won, Marty, 2 sprints to begin his career. Last time in the 4-horse Los Alamitos Futurity, set the pace. And I just thought he kind of emptied out at the end of that race. And it looks to me like this is a chance to say, well, if you can come back and run well here, we'll consider sending you down the Derby road. If not, maybe we need to reconsider. Where do you view High Velocity at the moment?
Yeah, when I made a line on this, Jay, I made him 8-1, and I went back and saw that he's 3-1 on the morning line at Santa Anita. I thought that might just be a reflection on Joel Rosario getting on him. I don't know, but it sure seems like Baffert is probably glad he has this horse in the race to go ahead and set the pace. I would guess the Tisla Magician for Mandela would be right behind him. You might have Zimmer Warrior going early off slightly shorter races. And then you got some unknowns in here with Encoder coming off the grass and Royal Act also coming off the grass. So for Peter Urton, who of course won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And again, we're not making news here or anything, but 1,000 words at off those 2 wins with the likelihood of a good trip behind his pace-setting stablemate, he will be a short price in here, and he should win. In terms of who can run second, Encoder is clearly an unknown. I know when I was out there for the Breeders' Cup and talking to John Sadler about this horse for the Juvenile Turf Sprint, he was really kind of high on him. And then after a couple of not very good races, he jumped up and won the Eddie Logan. So he too, like so many of these others, is getting a chance to go ahead and show what he can do on the dirt. And he's probable to get a pretty good trip from Mike Smith along the rails. So I don't know what to say about Tiz Magician. You've seen him more than me. He's kind of got that Omaha Beach look in that it took him a little while to break his maiden, and he went ahead and did it. And his buyers are pretty competitive as he's gone along. So, we've seen worse Derby preps than this, and this is going to be a pretty interesting race, I think.
Yeah, going back to just Encoder, I want to go back on the webinar page here because Marty was talking about how this horse is going to be given a chance on the dirt. Just a second ago, if you were following along, we highlighted John Sadler's statistics going from turf to dirt, and it's a darn good look for him. As you can see, his ROI is in the black, $2.46.
Wow.
So basically, he gets a 23% return on investment for a turf to dirt move. So this is a horse that's just off that alone is a reason to give him a second look on Saturday. From a pedigree standpoint, he's by English Channel, which usually means grass, and you can certainly understand why he's been on grass. He is out of a hard spun mare, so there's some dirt on the bottom side there. One thing you can look at here, you can look up the dam of the horse, No Rose, who despite being by hard spun, never ran on dirt. She made 2 starts in her career, and one was an off the turf race, which means it was on synthetic at Woodbine, and then a grass race. Both were poor performances, and then she became what she was probably meant to do, which was become a mare. But this, again, are some of the things that you can do on Formulator. You can say, well, geez, what did No Rose do in her career? I know English Channel was a grass champion, accomplished grass champion, Breeders' Cup turf winner, etc. But for a horse you're not familiar with, like the dam of Encoder, you can at least go back and look up what she did. And unfortunately, in this case, it doesn't help you a whole lot. But to me, it's an enlightening way that you can look up more detail on a lot of these horses when you're using Formulator. We had backtracked there after moving on to Tiz the Magician. So let's now move on to him. Marty was referencing how he kind of has the same career arc to this point as Omaha Beach, who was kind of a horse who settled for minor awards the first several starts of his career, and then broke through and obviously went on to have an accomplished career. But you take a look here at Omaha Beach, you can see in his first 4 starts, he ran second 3 times, and one time was third. And then when he finally broke through with a maiden win, it was lights out after that. So now let's go back after now here looking at Omaha Beach and take a look at this year's model, Tiz the Magician. Second in several starts to begin his career, 4 out of his first 5 races, and then breaking through last time with a win on the main track with a career best Beyer speed figure to this point. Victor Espinoza has ridden this horse in all of his races. Now, that doesn't mean that this horse is going to be another Omaha Beach, but it's an interesting parallel to this point. And one thing I like about this horse, Marty, is just remembering the way Tisnow improved throughout his career. You would think that a horse by Tisnow is just going to get better with more racing.
Yeah, there's a number of sires like that, Jay. He fits that mold whereby not a whole lot is expected of him as a younger horse, as a 2-year-old, but as he goes along with age and maturity, he's expected to get better. So, and boy, what poetic justice that would be if Mandela could do some good with him on the Derby trail with all the frustrations he experienced, including just a week or so ago here at Gulfstream Park with Omaha Beach.
And Spendthrift Farm is where Omaha Beach has gone to stud. They are co-owners of Thousand Words. They are co-owners of Tis a Magician, so they certainly have plenty of top action on Saturday in the Robert Lewis Stakes. Any other final thoughts for you, Marty, on this race?
No, not on this race in particular. If you wanted to talk about, some things going on down here, news-wise, here at Gulfstream Park, we had, and over at Tampa, I'll be over there next week, ahead of the Sam F. Davis, which, like the Holy Bull and like the Lewis and like the Withers, is one of the final 17-point races. And the horse we were discussing earlier, Jay, Independence Hall, he's supposed to run in there. I'm trying to get my arms around as to who will run against him. On the Todd Pletcher front, and we were talking about Portos for the Withers, I got word today that Gouverneur Morris, who in my mind probably is Pletcher's top Derby candidate, he's going to make his 3-year-old debut in the Southwest Stakes at Oaklawn Park on February 17th. He'll run one more time after that. Gouverneur Morris, of course, was second behind Maxfield, who, by the way, we had something in the, I think, Friday editions of the Racing Forum. He has just returned to the Brendan Walsh shed row up at Palm Meadows, just north of here. So I think Brendan's up against it time-wise. He has not yet breezed. Brendan doesn't know when Maxfield will be able to breeze. But anyway, Maxfield was the winner, and Gouverneur Morris was the runner-up in the Breeders' Futurity, a Grade 1 last October at Keeneland. So a lot of folks looking forward to seeing what kind of impact they can make, with both of them obviously having skipped the Breeders' Cup and these first couple of rounds of preps and what they can do down the road.
And then in terms of, I'll give an update on a couple of horses that are out here. We'd mentioned the depth of Baffert's barn. You brought up Authentic. He's supposed to run in the San Felipe, which is the next big race on this circuit on March the 7th. He's waiting until then. Storm the Court, who was the Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner and the Eclipse Award winner as champion 2-year-old male, is supposed to make his first start as a 3-year-old a week from Sunday. That would be February 9th in the San Vicente at Santa Anita. It's kind of an old school way to bring a horse back. It's a 7-furlong race. It's not a point scoring race, but it's analogous to what's going on with a race like the Swale on Saturday at Gulfstream Park. Very similar type of program for the horses that are running in the Swale, that are trying to move along. That's kind of what you're going to see with Storm the Court when he begins his 3-year-old campaign. Well, that's our overall look at the 3 Derby point-scoring races that'll be run on Saturday: the Withers, Holy Bull, and Robert Lewis, and more importantly, an overview of some of the top 3-year-olds to follow as we move on towards the Kentucky Derby, which is a little more than 3 months away. Marty and I will be starting up our Derby Watch Top 20 countdown in 2 weeks, and obviously the results of the races this weekend and whatever goes on next weekend regarding races like the Sam Davis and the San Vicente will be most impactful as we put together that inaugural Top 20 list and then continue our updates as we move on towards the Kentucky Derby. I want to thank all of you for tuning in and watching and listening over the last 45 minutes or so. For Marty McGee, I'm Jay Privman. Thanks so much, and we'll see you on the Derby Trail this spring.